Howdy, Ags. This is going to be a rough one. I'm glad you're with me, though. I'm here for you. Going to get through this thick or thin. That's what I can do in the meantime when we are struggling. Yeah, it's not a result that we were looking for yesterday. It was worse than I thought it was going to be. I predicted, I think, 28-21. Ended up final score being 42-21. Kind of got our tail kicked all over the field. We need to kind of talk about it the way it is. Running theme through this, to be honest. So want to start off tonight by recapping, actually just talking about a tweet from Paul Feinbaum to start off with. And he said that A&M is going to be is a cupcake for Alabama next weekend. Why mention that? Well, let me tell you. I think the media has this sort of weird role that's not really acknowledged. And so I've kind of seen myself a little bit like that. I'm not really media or anything. I mean, I guess I'm reporting a little bit, I'm giving an opinion, those kinds of things, but it is part of what I see myself as doing to a degree. But I think that role is kind of a level of a point to provide bulletin board material at the right times for the right people when they need it, right? So I think what he's saying there is kind of like a wake-up call, right? It's like you're a cupcake, and so get with it. It's kind of a way. It kind of feels like an insult, but I think that sort of comment is made to light a fire under somebody's ass. That's what I think it's for. That's what I hope to do, at least somewhat, through this episode and probably for the rest of the year as we go through this together, because there needs to be a fire lit. There needs to be, I don't know what else to call it, heartfelt accountability. I'm not here to attack anyone. I am here just to simply give my opinion. They are mine. And I'm sure you have some of your own. Put them in the comments. We can all give a little bit of that and kind of get this thing sorted out. And so I'm going to give you a lot of my opinions for tonight, and you can by all means agree or disagree with any of those. It's not really for that. This is part of my coping mechanism. I get to talk about it here so that I can get through this. So let me start off by getting through this by saying that I think I've lost some trust in Jimbo. To illustrate that, let me tell you a story, okay? So I turn 40 in about 2.5 months, and as part of my, I have a goal for turning 40. My goal is to run a 5-minute mile, 1 mile in 5 minutes. Actually, I want to do 4:59. I want to break that barrier, but we'll use this for talking purposes. Let's actually simplify it for a second, okay? It makes it real easy to tell the story. Let's say I want to run that mile in 4 minutes, okay? So my goal is to run a mile in 4 minutes. It's not really, it's 5 minutes, but you get the idea. So what I want to do then is I have no business racing somebody in 1 mile who can run a 4-minute mile if I cannot run a 400, a quarter of a mile, in at least 1 minute. Okay, did you hear that? You understand that what I just said? So that's part of like how you train on these kinds of things. If I need to run a mile in 4 minutes, then that means I need to run 1 lap, a quarter of a mile around a track in 1 minute, right? Because 1 times 4 would be 4 minutes. That's how that works. So there's no reason for me to go race anybody in that type of situation unless I can at least run a quarter mile in 1 minute, 60 seconds, okay? Now, if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to run a quarter in 60 seconds, then by God, I ought to be able to run 100 meters in 15 seconds. If I can't run 100 yards in 15 seconds, then what am I doing? So I better practice running 100 meters, and I better practice running that at 15 seconds. If I don't run it in 15 seconds, then there's no point in me going out and trying to run a quarter mile in 60. It's not going to happen. If I cannot run 100 meters in 15 seconds, then there's no way to run a quarter mile in 60. And the same way goes on out and out and out. If I can't run a quarter mile in 1 minute, then I can't run a mile in 4 minutes. It's not possible. So there's no reason for me to go off doing this whole mile in 4 minutes kind of thing if I can't do those other things too. I'd have to run an 800 in 2 minutes, and we can just kind of break all that down and keep going on and down. Why bring all this up? Because it relates. We keep hearing about execution. If I can't execute a quarter mile in 60 seconds, then I can't execute a mile in 4 minutes. See where I'm going with this? It's about this execution talk. And I'm tired of hearing execution talk. It's a low-key way to kind of sidetrack the issue. And so by continuing to hear this, I have lost some trust. Now, let me be straight. Jimbo's not going anywhere. I don't want Jimbo to go anywhere. I am behind Jimbo, okay? But there needs to be some safe accountability taking place, okay? So I'm here to be as honest as possible. Before I finish the rest of the story and this whole analogy, I think it's worth putting out there, and you might have noticed this, sometimes it's just kind of the nature of the situation. When you're at a press conference and you listen to those press conferences, do you ever feel like there's questions being withheld? Do you ever think that there's maybe things that are not being said that you're like, well, why didn't we say that? Why didn't we call that? I mean, I'm not at those pressers. I have no way to get into those pressers and those kinds of things. I would ask maybe a couple different questions if I were there. The point is I'm not in debt to anyone. I can get on here and say what needs to be said. And it's helpful that you guys have subscribed and done those things, and that would help kind of have an independent source to be able to say these things whenever they need to be said. Because I'm not accountable to anybody except me. Okay? So, and technically you, as a matter of fact, because if you don't watch and you don't subscribe, then what am I doing? But you get the idea, right? So if we're going to keep talking about execution, then when I'm running that mile, I've got to go execute a quarter mile in 60 seconds. And I've got to practice that, and I've got to practice that and practice that. If I run that quarter mile in 75 seconds, I'm not running the mile in the 4 minutes, right? Right. Question is if I've got a coach on that, right, or if I'm coaching myself and I'm allowing myself to keep running that quarter mile in 75 seconds, what am I doing? I'm practicing failure is what I'm doing. So execution is something where you practice and practice and practice until you can't get wrong. That's how you optimize execution. You've heard the saying before. That is how this works. Again, if I want to meet that goal, I can't go out and just continue to keep executing wrongly. There's got to be some level at which this is being allowed. And frankly, this is what concerns me the most. With the current state that we're in, where we're at, I'm worried that that is becoming a culture piece. It needed to be said. That is something that cannot be allowed. The culture of not performing, being allowed to do something wrong, should not be allowed. Of course, there's a progression with this, though, right? Like you don't go out and, like I said, I don't just go out and run the quarter the first time in 60 seconds. I've got to practice that, right? And that takes time, and I get it. We can talk about like how long it should take for that to happen, because we do have some inexperienced guys, we do have some young guys. But let's be clear about some of these things. Let's talk about these schemes for a minute. I don't Do you recall low snaps happening last year? Do you recall guys getting past the right edge or coming up through the middle on the right side of the line? Do you remember that last year? I don't remember that. Why is that happening this year then if we've actually got more experience? That's a good question. Why is that, to quote the meme there? Um, there's some issues, right? That doesn't hold water. That sort of idea and that excuse that we are inexperienced. We are inexperienced on the defensive line, okay? But everybody is inexperienced on the defensive side. Why? Because we're running a new scheme this year. So everybody's brand new. Now it behooves me why we would actually be changing schemes. I didn't get the memo that last year's scheme didn't work. Did you? Did you get that memo? Check your mailbox. Check your inbox. Check and see where you got that message somewhere. Okay, I didn't get it. Now, oddly enough, we still ran the three-man front last year against Mississippi State. It didn't work then. It doesn't seem to be working this year, but by Sol Ross, we are still trying to run that. Good grief. It is incumbent upon the person that's instituting that to figure out a way to make that work or change. This is not a personal thing towards Durkin. None of this is personal. It's not against Jimbo. It's not against Adazio. It's not against the players. It's about the actions that have taken place and speaking truth to those actions. This scheme, the way it's being implemented right now, is not working. It needs to change. And it needs to change now. It needs to get righted immediately. These are not poor players. Let's go through some of these players, by the way, too, because we can make that argument on the defensive line because McKinley Jackson's not playing, although we do have Toon Meese, but he did not play this last game. You know, we do have Diggs on there that is a veteran, but we are playing Walter Nolan. We are playing Anthony Lucas. We are playing, well, I mean, we're playing Rakes quite a bit too, and he's got plenty of experience. So we have some experience there, although it's probably our least experienced area. Cooper, Andre White's out. We've got it, but Russell. We might say Russell is inexperienced. He hasn't really played much. Okay, I'll give a little bit there, but Cooper's got experience. Tyreek Chappelle, Jalen Jones, Damani Richardson, Antonio Johnson. What's the problem there? We've got Jordan Gilbert. Okay, that's 1 out of the 5. So I don't want to hear so much about this inexperience business. But there is a level of execution that's not taking place too. So there's a healthy talk about what the players need to do too. We've heard that you've heard it and seen it. All the low snaps, right? We've seen the drop passes. Wow, we're still dropping passes. We may need to reevaluate that whole regiment of practicing for wide receivers altogether. This has been going on for a while, and we've been hearing this execution talk for at least 2 years now. We've recruited top 10 classes every year since 2018. Every class except Jimbo's first class it has been top 10. Where are all these people? Where's the development? This should not be a problem at this point. It shouldn't. But you know, there are some things that again need to change very quickly. Very, 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 very quickly. I mean, good grief. Mike Leach even said it in a tweet after the game that we're essentially telegraphing what we're doing, like we're kind of giving it away. Oh, if I can find it before the end of this pod, I'll read it verbatim. It was like stake to the heart kind of situation. Like, man, really we're that predictable, but we all knew that, right? We all knew that we were that predictable. You couldn't exactly put your finger on it, right? Because you're not the expert coach. You don't have all the angles during the game to see everything like that is. I've been looking for footage to kind of put some of these things together. It's really difficult to get a hold of. Let's talk about the wide receivers for a second, right? Because if if you play any basketball, you might kind of know this, and there's this element of playing shadow games with certain people when you're running down the court. And so like I might be running uh, down on offense and somebody's covering me, so I might run over their right shoulder and get them to turn their head to the right. And as soon as I do that, I know that they're looking on that side of their body. So then I'm going to cut back over to the other side, right? And so they've looked that way, and now I'm on the other opposite side, and they can't tell where I'm at. All right, and you can continue to keep playing like that all day long. It's sort of that idea about how to get yourself open is kind of what I'm speaking to here, right? And so in football, one of the big ways for that to take place is with your hips. Watching the defender's hips is a huge thing. So when you run up to the defender and you just simply break left or break right, I mean, if you don't make any motions like I was kind of doing right there, then you're going to get a very simple movement from the defender and a one decision route from the defender, so that they're just going to stay on the receiver, right? So you saw this on the goal line, right? So I don't know if you saw this, and I hope you did. But it kind of makes so much sense. It's like, well, why aren't we doing those kinds of things, right? And Antonio Johnson was on the defender. I forget the receiver for Mississippi State, but it was like on the 3 yard line or something. So he initial takes like a step forward, kind of shuffles his feet. He bounces inside, and then as soon as Antonio Johnson turns his hips and or motions to go inside, what does he do? He then goes back outside. So the defense is always reactionary, always. And so when you do that, he was able to get a little bit of separation. Those are some of the things that we're just not quite doing. We do have it sometimes. I think it was either Evan Stewart or maybe even Chris Marshall. I can't quite remember. Ran a long comeback. It looked like honestly Jeff Fuller was running that sucker because they were very well wide open. So when you're running up to the defender, right, you want to do the same thing. It works whether or not you're going left, right, deep, or coming back. When you get up to the defender and they're backpedaling, I don't know, they started 7 yards back, let's just say, and you finally get up onto them, they are going to have to turn their hips to run with you, okay? I mean, this is all just basic stuff, y'all. I am by no means like some sort of guru on this, but I know enough, from playing and some other things like this to know that these are some real basic stuff. When the defender turns their hips, because they're going to have to keep running with you at the speed that you're running to go deep, when they turn their hips, you stop, plant, and turn back. Their momentum keeps them going deep, and they still have to turn their hips again before they can actually plant and come back with you, and it creates separation. And it was a good route run, and Jimbo's right at some level that we're just not executing. There is some truth to that. The question is what percentage of execution is needed to take place, right? So for instance, try and illustrate this really well for you, right? Okay, because we talked about this in the preview, is that Mississippi State's running these mesh routes, right? And so when they cross, they are naturally picking somebody. Is there a lot of thinking in what you have to do in that route? Is there any thinking in that? I'm gonna start. I'm gonna cross. I'm gonna find the wide receiver on the other side of the field, and I'm going to run as close to them as humanly possible. And then I'm going to look for the ball as soon as I cross. That's hard, isn't it? It's real difficult. That's like one of the easiest things that you can possibly do. So the routes in some of the things that we're running. You saw this maybe even a couple, you got to connect all these dots a little bit, right? A couple weeks ago when Jimbo got on to Chase Lane, right? It looked like to me, and you can never know again because you can never see quite the full play going on, but it looked like he missed a read, right? Looked like he missed a read. You see the difference there? So in one situation, our receivers have to make a more in-depth and complex decision. Theirs don't. Which one do you want to run in? I mean, at this point, from what we've seen, the simpler one is the one that's getting the job done, and there's got to be a reason for that. So that's what I think most people are getting at when they're talking about a scheme change on offense. And those kinds of things, we're relying on our wide receivers, linemen, and quarterback to all be on the same page on these types of plays. It's so easy for one of them to be wrong. One of the things that Mike Leach does when he runs those wide splits, and we talked about this in the preview as well, but I didn't get to this part about it, is that it makes it, well, we did say that it makes it almost impossible for you to get a sack, right? And did we get a sack? I don't even know if we got one. We may have gotten one, but I don't think we got any. So it played out just as the preview that I gave you. Hopefully you found value in that and now see that. But the point is when they play that wide, it creates that extra length that you have to go. But it's also a very simple scheme to pick up, to teach, and to get everybody on the same page. And so even if you're young in the system and he's like 3 years in, his system's working and they're executing it well. We're not 5 years in. So, and I'm not saying go to the air raid, that sort of thing, but you see the differences in what's going on. And anybody that knows anything about the air raid, that did as much research as I did into it, which is not that much. I'm not trying to say I did a whole lot. It didn't do that much, but as soon as you do anything in it, you figure out that that's one of the reasons why people do it, is because they can install it very easily. And it's effective. And it also practices very easily. It's almost, the scheme is really inputted by just practicing. Like you just go out and you do a few things and you've basically, it's not quite that simple, but you basically have it once you've got a few concepts down. And so that's problematic. But where we're going to get that change, I don't know. I don't know. I've seen some change. We got the change with Max Johnson. He's now hurt. We got a couple more interceptions, 1 or 2 from Haynes when he went in. Not looking good. Weirdly enough, we were in the exact same situation as we were last year, except we lost to App State and not Arkansas, but then going into Bama 3-2. I don't think we're going to see the same result this year. I really don't. How fantastic that would be if that would be the case. What's the saving grace in this whole thing? Perhaps, if we're looking for a moral victory, we were really at one point in that game. I know it's 42-21. And there we fourth quarter was kind of, it looked like kind of garbage time to a degree. Even our touchdown, they make it 21. But we played, at one point I remarked, we played so poorly, and yet we were still that close at the point that it was before. I think Mississippi State tacked on their last 2 touchdowns. One I think was a pick 6 or something, right? So just not quite one you expect to happen anyways. But we were that close, having played that bad. And that's not meant to say that, we could have won that game. That's not really the point. But the point is that if we just played halfway decent, we probably could have won. Just halfway decent, but to play that poorly and be that close, it speaks to the potential that we're leaving out on the field every week. Every week we're playing that bad. We can play so much better. What do you all think about this? It helps to talk about it. It does. This is helping me get to get it out right here. So put your thoughts in the comments. We'll figure it out. I know I'd like to hear y'all's opinion because I may be one, and if I hear 5 or 10 others, then it may be a little bit different take on each one of them, and somehow, some way, we figure out some of the issues. What I can tell you though, I feel pretty confident about this, is we don't really need an offensive coordinator. I'm not against that. I'm actually kind of for that, but that's not going to fix the problem. It's not. It's not the issue. Because Jimbo's got some, like I said, some truth to we're not executing, and there are some open receivers, and we're not getting to them. We're giving up pressure through the offensive line, those kinds of things. So that's not really the answer to our problems. There are deeper systemic issues, as I hope I've outlined tonight. So tell me what you think. We'll all figure it out as we all talk about it. So, and it's going to be, in the end, I think, going to rest on this one thing, the last topic of the night. And I'm just really going to just leave you with this. But win, lose, or draw, I'm an Aggie till the day I die. I know you are too, and that's where I'm gonna leave this for tonight. But I'm gonna keep that idea circulating because I'm not happy with where we're at right now. But by God, I'm an Aggie till the day I die. We'll see you for the preview for Alabama. Thanks and gig 'em.